Make sure to click the join button if you like this channel and you want to support this work. Okay, so today I want to talk to you about, again, further the subject of you're projecting onto your borderline feelings they don't have. This is important to understand. We're all really clear through our experience of how the borderline projects their negative feelings onto us. You know, when they accuse you of wanting to destroy them and wanting to kill them, and you know that you don't love them, and you're trying to ruin their life and all those kinds of things. That is their projection of their own internal, self-hatred and shame and feelings of unworthiness and fear of rejection. They reject you first. It's very much a kid, I'm going to take my ball and go home. They reject you first because they're sure you're going to reject them and they don't want to feel that pain, so they reject you first. It's a way of controlling their, of holding on to the intimacy they've just had and controlling it in a really weird, twisted way. But if you are a partner of a borderline, you do the same thing. Not exactly the same, but you project your feelings onto the borderline. Because the borderline is at a state of emotional regression at a very early state, and not a very immature state, they don't have the depth of feelings for you that you want them to have. They have limited empathy, and they have limited ability to really truly love and care about you. They project. They're projecting onto you either their transferred feelings of love for you as though you are a parent, which you're not. And then they project onto you their shame and fear of abandonment. So we're all familiar with that. But you project onto them a love and an intimacy that they don't have. And that's one of the reasons that you stay in this. Because if you can become fully conscious and fully aware and get out of the denial having to do with their lack of empathy towards you, if you can fully become conscious that they have never had and shared the kinds of feelings for you that you have for them, and if you can understand that it really is just an infantile projection, that it's not the intimacy and the love that you think that they have, then you're going to be a lot better off having the strength to walk away. It's the denial that keeps you in it, what people call ruminating. That's what's happening when you're ruminating, which is another euphemism for obsession. What you're ruminating on is you're rooting inside of what they said and what they did, trying to find the kernels of the intimacy and the love that you desperately want from them. But it's not there, and that's why it makes you feel crazy. Because on the one hand, of course, when they love bomb you, it really feels like they're there. It really feels like they love you. And then they act as though they never loved you, and this makes you crazy. And then you continue, understandably, because there's a part of you that doesn't understand, because people don't act like that if they don't love you. So why does she not love me now, but she did before? So there's a denial there. The denial is what keeps you waiting for them to hoover you back, is the fantasy that they really do love me, they see me, and it's the real love. For the first time, they have real love from me, and I'm the one who's really, truly loving them, and that is why they're so afraid and why they're running away. And if I can just get them to stay with me long enough, I'll be able to melt the icy, wall around their heart, and they'll finally surrender to the love they've always wanted and feel for me, and it'll all be okay. Unless, of course, that's just not at all what's happening, and they don't have that level of love for you, and they really are just what, you go back and forth between they don't give a crap about me to they really love me more than anything, because that's what they tell you, right? So you got to get over the denial. The denial is that, no, they don't. They don't have that kind of intimate love for you. So let's take a look, because I want to point out some of the projections that I see, which is, your denial. You're projecting onto them what you feel, and you want them to feel what you're feeling. You project it onto them, just like they project their negative feelings onto you. You project your positive feelings onto them. So this is in response to BPD loving a borderline, the real reason BPD split, and a person comes up with a really great, really great symbolic explanation. Because I say in there that when BPD split, what they're doing is they're collecting love trophies, which means that when the intimacy happens for them, it does create feelings of intimacy and vulnerability, which they do want, but they can't tolerate that feeling. So then they go into splitting mode, and they start seeing you as this negative person, and so they destroy the relationship. But what they're doing when they destroy the relationship is they're certain the more vulnerable they become with you, you will become more turned off and you will reject them. So what they're doing is they are taking that feeling of love and intimacy and freezing it in time. Which is why, if you talk to borderlines, they talk about their exes and they remember all of their exes. It's because it's like, serial killers do this. This is the reason why serial killers kill people, many of them, is that they're not trying to kill them, they want to keep them forever. And so they kill them before they can leave them so that they can relive the intimacy. That's why they're necrophiliacs, and that's why they keep treasures. And I think the borderlines are doing the same thing. They're killing the relationship, number one, to relieve themselves of the fear of abandonment, but also because once they've got that intimacy, they want to control it. So they're, it's like a serial killer. They're killing you and then running away with the intimacy, and they're reliving it. So this person says they have a collection of toy puppets that are all on a shelf, just like a 3 to 5 year old will take the puppet off, and goes on to say that, and then, let's say, he says, then they give it to the dog. Once they lose interest and they don't want to play with it anymore, then they give it to the dog, who will chew them up and devour the puppet while the borderline watches with sadistic enjoyment. That is a projection. In order for somebody to have sadistic enjoyment, they must have strong feelings for you. And I don't think they have sadistic enjoyment. I went on to say, I'm in full agreement with you, except for the part where they watch with sadistic enjoyment, because they don't, you're not that important to them for them to have sadistic enjoyment. That is that person's projection. That, again, this is all about, for both the borderline and the codependent, it's all about narcissistic, making yourself out to be far more important than you are. You're not that important that somebody's going to go to all that trouble just to then throw you away and watch with sadistic enjoyment. That's your childish, infantile need from your codependents to be that important to them. That, yes, they're doing it, but it's because they're sadistically coming after me. Like, it's an afterthought. Now, once you're out of their frame of reference, they've forgotten about you. You're not that important that they're going to remember you after the fact and watch with sadistic enjoyment while the dog tears your head off. That is how it feels to you. But that's why it's your projection. But you're not that important to them. And this is your need to feel important. And this must have been how you felt as a kid. So I go on and say something to that effect. And then somebody else responds and says they probably won't even remember what you look like once the relationship is over. The brain shuts off to avoid the trauma of having to think about the hurt, and they move on to something and someone else. Then this person comes back with another projection about how important he is to this borderline. And so he's projecting onto their hoovering. So we need to understand that hoovering isn't because you're important. This is the fantasy. Fantasy is that you've reached them, you've loved them so deeply that they'll never be able to forget you. And if you are with a borderline, after multiple discards, then when you get hoovered back in, this is going to be part of your agenda, is to be so important to them, so loving to them, to make such an impression upon them that even if they discard you again, they'll remember and they'll come after you because you're special. And they're coming after you because you're available. That's it. And they really don't, they really mean what they say. When they see you and think you're wonderful, they mean that just like an infant does. And when they discard you and don't want anything to do with you, it's because they've lost interest and they're looking for something else. But here's the projection. This one says, I would always give her items that she needed and photographs of myself, so there was always something in front of her to remind her of me. Her apartment is filled with stuff I bought her. This is probably why she always contacts me 2 or 3 weeks after she disappears. Again, this is his projection. He wants to be important. This is your narcissistic feelings of grandiosity, and it's a delusion. And this is what keeps you in it. Do you see now that both the borderline and the codependent are wrapped up in their own, narcissistic grandiosity? And it's a complete delusion. You're not that important. She may have her apartment filled with stuff, but I promise you, when she walks by, she's not looking at things and ruminating about you, and that's what drives her to call you. It's because she's bored with whomever or something, and you are one of many on her list, and she calls you because you're there, and she knows that you'll be there for her. Like one person said, her borderline ex said to him, and you always take me back. That's why. But this is your delusion, that you are so important, that you have made such an impression upon them that, eventually, the fantasy is eventually this, if you fill her apartment with enough stuff, that after 5 or 6 or 10 or 20 or 100 hoovers, it'll stick. And this is what keeps you in it. So just by reading that, I know you're not in therapy. You're not in Coda. Because you're wrapped up in your own delusion. And you're just like everybody else. I'm not trying to single you out. You're just like everybody else. All right, so let's see. There were some other ones I wanted to look at here, which show the narcissistic delusion that we have, that we are more important to them than we think. Than we think we are. We're not as important as we think. And let's see here if I can find it. A couple more. Sorry, my apologies for the wait here. I should have been more prepared. So here's one. I'll say this, if anybody watching my videos feels a strong desire to contact me personally, and wants to have a one-on-one personal friendship conversation with me, it means you need counseling. I get this probably once every week or every other week. Somebody will contact me and say, can I talk to you on the phone? And so I got one of these. Somebody says, can we talk one-on-one? And I asked, are you asking me to counsel you? To which the person says, basically, I feel like you understand me, and they want to be able to talk with somebody they feel understands them. Again, this shows the isolation, and it again shows that narcissistic, childish need for parental one-on-one focus. So what this really means is that you want, what you really need, what you'll benefit from, is psychological counseling. What you also need is you need to have more than just one person connect with you, because that's sort of like the codependent hyper focus of intimacy with one person. And that there's nothing wrong with that, but it's not necessarily helpful for you. What you need is to have a group of people that you can relate to, so you realize that you're not alone. The fantasy here is that they're special and I'm special and they want to talk with me. But there's a ton of people that have the same experience that I do. So that's what CODA is all about, coda.org. Go there. And there are people who actually are looking for other people that they can share their experience with one-on-one. And there's a whole group of them. And that's where you need to be in a group setting, because that gets you out of your narcissism of it's just me and it's just you and it's you and me against the world. It mirrors what happens in the codependent relationship, even if it's not romantic. But the need to connect with me one-on-one because you've seen me and you feel we connect. It also shows a presumption. You know, how presumptuous is it? Here I am, I got this channel, I got a lot of people watching. It's really presumptuous that you are going to be so important that I'm going to drop everything and give you my phone number and talk just to you. It really shows a presumption, you know, that I don't, you know, that you didn't even bother to say, hey, can I pay you for your time? Can I, you know, it's just, hi, I like you, let's be friends. It's really, it shows an immaturity and a childish presumption, but it's, you know, this is why codependence and borderlines are so similar. Fixating on that person will make me feel better. So this is why I recommend therapy, CODA, and meditation. So again, please don't ask me for that, people. If you feel that, listen to what I say. Go to CODA. There are plenty of people there that will want to connect with you, and they will be grateful for the opportunity to be able to help you. Here's the last one. We'll talk about this. Somebody says, why are they so incredibly hypersexual? Talking about the borderline. And then they answer their own question with, I've read that hypersexuality can be a way to actually avoid true intimacy. Well, you know, of course that's a possibility, but that assumes a connection that you don't have. Because if you have an actual connection with somebody and the intimacy is shared and that person becomes afraid, maybe they'll use sex to avoid intimacy. But the actual truth is that when it comes to intimacy and sex, if it's somebody who's afraid of intimacy, they start withholding sex. They don't seek more of it. But BPDs seek to escape their pain, loneliness, and anxiety through dangerous situations, other kinds of obsessions like gambling, like drugs, alcohol, you know, other things like that. And sex is a really great way because there's all those, you know, chemicals and dopamine and things like that. So it's like a drug trip. So they're doing it to avoid their own feelings. They're not doing it to avoid intimacy, but it shows the projection of the codependent. The codependent wants intimacy, and so she's projecting on the hypersexuality of the borderline. Like, why are they so hypersexual? Is it because they're avoiding intimacy? That's what she wants. That's her projection. They don't care about you that much. They're infants and they're just looking for whatever is going to distract them from their pain. And so this means that you need to take a look at your need for intimacy because you're projecting onto the borderline something they don't have. Okay? So the point of all this is that if you can become aware of how you project your reality onto the borderline and that they don't share, as well as you already know they project onto you their reality that you don't share. When you can realize that, it'll take you out of that cycle of that Pavlovian dog of, you know, waiting for them to hoover you back in, because there's that fantasy that this time it'll work, that everybody so far that I've, you know, mentioned has this belief that the more that you keep connecting with them, it builds up and it accumulates and will turn into love. And what a borderline once said to me is that they have this big giant emptiness inside of them, and no matter how much love you give them, it just disappears, which means that they're back at ground zero every time they meet you, which means you're not that important. So get over yourself, get out of your delusion, get to therapy, get to CODA, and start taking a look at how you project your narcissism and your fantasies and why that keeps you in the loop of pain. and so you can get out. Click the join button if you want to find out how I used my three-pronged approach to heal from my toxic borderline relationship. All right, that's it. Talk to you guys soon.